Welcome to the Riff. Today on the Riff, Jeremy sits down with the legendary Coach Dale Clayton. They get to discuss how Jesus can make an impact on people's lives through the art of coaching. And as I listened to this one, I thought two things. One, I want Coach Clayton to be my mentor. And two, Jeremy really reminds me of the Barbara Walters of church podcasts. This is a good one. We hope today is helpful. Thanks for listening.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Riff. I'm excited that you're joining us wherever you're joining us, however you're joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you are listening on an app, or wherever you get your podcasts. I've been looking forward to this episode. I have a very special guest with me today. As a guest of The Riff, it is Coach Dale Clayton from Nashville, Tennessee. So Coach Clayton via Zoom, welcome to The Riff.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. I've been looking forward to it since you called me and asked me if I could participate. I'm always glad to help you any way that I can.
Well, you are a great help to me. Now, I'm assuming you're coming to us from Nashville. You kind of travel the world. Are you in Nashville today?
I am presently in Nashville, yes.
Okay. Well, in this episode, what I want to do, I want to talk, briefly, I want to talk about mentorship. Coach Clayton is a mentor in my life, and I want to talk a little bit about how we met, and then I'm going to interview you, Coach, a little bit about your life journey, and because it's the Riff, we don't plan ahead, so we'll just have a conversation together. But for those who are joining us, I think it's so important to have a mentor. I believe a mentor is like a rocket booster that helps you get to an altitude you could never get on your own. And they're gifts from God. And it was about 5 years ago that God brought you into my life. And from the first time we met, I knew that it was more than a task and a role that brought us together, that God was using you to encourage me. And so we're going to get into that in this episode. But for those who are listening, I've got the opportunity to just interview someone I look up to, respect as a spiritual leader in my life and as someone who's done some amazing things in his life. So Coach Dale Clayton, what do we need to know about you? Give us just the basics. You're married to Pamela. How long y'all been married?
Well, it will be 52 years in July.
Now, is that 52, 26 each? Or, I mean, we're talking 52 together. Like,
we're talking 52 together.
That's over 100 years of marriage experience right there.
Well, I hate to think about it that way. I mean, I would be better at it than I am.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're pretty good at it. And you have a daughter, Monica.
Yeah. Monica is our only child. She lives here in Nashville.
Okay. And you got some grandkids along the way as well.
Yes, we have three.
Okay.
Ian is 17, Ava is 13, and Clayton is 9.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to the beginning and then walk us through just the life and times of Dale Clayton. And so does it start in Florida? Is that where you're born, grew up?
Yes, I grew up in Mount Dora, Florida.
Okay.
A town of about 15,000, located just a little bit north of Orlando, between Orlando and Ocala.
Okay.
Went to high school there and left there and went to a small school in Tennessee called Milligan University, where I played basketball for 4 years, became the financial aid director and the assistant coach for 4 years. And that started my coaching career.
Okay, so in high school, were you many sports or was it all basketball? Tell us a little bit, brag a little bit about what high school career looked like for Coach Clayton.
Wow. Well, I was a 3-sport athlete.
Let me guess. Can I guess them?
Yes.
Okay, basketball?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to say cross country?
No.
Tennis?
No.
Okay, I give up. What were they?
My best sport was football.
Okay.
223-pound running back. That was an all-state player and had knee surgery in 67, which created some problems for me. Played basketball. Was a 4-time all-conference player, an all-state player, and led our team to the state tournament in '68. And then I ran track. I actually made my first state track meet as a freshman. Wow. I ran the 100, 220, and the 440. Well, now they call it the 400. That's a race you run because you're told to, not because you want to.
Now, when you were thinking about college, were there different ones you were considering? How did you end up at Milligan?
Well, that's interesting. I only wanted to play football, but because of my knee injury, it became problematic. I had talked to several schools about playing football, really thought I was going to go to Florida State, but then football just was no longer in the picture. I was a good high school basketball player, not a great player. I wasn't big enough. I was only 6'2". But I went to a smaller school as a result of one of my high school coaches that went to school there and said, hey, let me take you to this school and see what you think. So we drove up to East Tennessee, and I wanted to go someplace where I didn't know anyone, Jeremy. And I wanted to have to make it on my own. So I turned down a lot of local schools around Florida, went all the way to Tennessee in the mountains, and just had to make it on my own. But that's what and it was really the best thing that ever happened to me because the coach that recruited me decided to retire that summer. A new coach came in who became my college coach and who today is my very best friend. His name's Phil Worrell. And Phil was who God used to change the direction of my life because Phil was such a strong Christian, and his faith was very important to him and how he coached, and that influenced me, and I became a Christian, and then I started coaching like he coached and wanted to coach for the same reason that he coached, which was to impact the lives of players for Christ.
Well, let's talk a little bit about coaching because I'm talking to a coaching legend right here. I wrote down some notes here. You coached 23 years of college basketball, been in college basketball for closer to 50 years of some capacity, or more than that maybe. But a couple of things that the internet says about you. You tell me if this is true. You were president of the Black Coaches Association at one point. Is that true?
That's true. I helped start the association.
Okay, so then that is very true with an asterisk. Not only part of it, you started it. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
Well, it came about in 1987, 88. We were in a meeting with George Raveling, John Thompson, Nolan Richardson, Rudy Washington, John Chaney, Tubby Smith, some other coaches, and we were talking about the fact that the blacks were not getting an opportunity to become head coaches at Division I schools, especially large schools. And we were trying to find out what could we do to help change that. And so the Black Coaches Association was formed. And we tried to train, encourage, and show coaches some of the things that they were going to need to do to try to have an opportunity to become a head coach at large, predominantly white institutions. And so we tried to find guys that we thought were being successful. Wade Houston was a guy that we thought was really doing a great job at the University of Louisville with Denny Crum. They'd been in the national championships, and we thought he would be a great candidate. And so we tried to get together to help him and encourage him, find some people who could help us prepare ourselves. And it worked out real well because Wade became the head coach at the University of Tennessee.
Wow.
But we also had help, especially from guys like Dean Smith, who was very sensitive to what we were doing. He was a very good friend of John Thompson. And when Proposition 48 came along, which was legislation that said you had to have certain grade point averages in order to get scholarships, and some things weren't going well. And so Dean Smith, because of his friendship with John Thompson, they decided that they were going to go on strike. And they had national games that would be impacted by that. And so when some people found out that Dean Smith and some other coaches were involved, then it started to help change some things. But thanks to John Thompson and Nolan Richardson, those guys, especially George Raveling, we were able to get some people's attention.
Yeah.
And we helped teach coaches what they needed to do in order to put themselves in a position to be considered for those positions. Helped them learn how to have interviews, and one thing led to another, and we started getting some guys hired.
Now, what you've done is you've lifted a lid in the whole coaching and basketball industry, and you've changed the landscape of the game. You and some friends who started this organization. As you look at this, just the scene of college basketball, isn't it amazing to see what God's done through initiatives like this?
Well, it's really been great to be a part of it. And to say that it was difficult would be an understatement, Jeremy. But God's faithful. We stayed with it. We did the things that we thought we needed to do. He engaged us with the right people, brought the right people along beside us from a press standpoint that could help us get the message out. And we started inviting some ADs to some of our meetings so they could see what we were doing. And it just worked. It was a long process, but we had to be very careful because we had to put the right people in the right positions. And one of the things we had to do was teach coaches the importance of being able to handle themselves and to be able to communicate and function well with the alumni, because alumni had so much to do with who was being hired. And when you became the head coach at that level, you had to be able to communicate and get along with the alumni of a particular institution. And so there was a lot of work that needed to be done to prepare coaches to do that, because coaches had been assistants and worked with recruiting, but they had never really been involved with the movers or shakers at a particular university. And so here's what we did. We had to teach guys how to become a CEO, because that's what the head coach is. He's like the CEO of a company. And when we taught guys how to do that, they knew how to coach. They knew how to recruit. They just needed to learn how to really do a good job with the press and with alumni and make people feel comfortable in that particular area.
So back when you started coaching, how many African-American head coaches in Division I would there have been?
Wow, very few. In fact, there would be very few overall. But if you looked at Division I or major colleges, there were 4.
Wow.
That was John Thompson, John Chaney, George Raveling, and a guy that they used to call the Silver Fox, who coached at the University of Arizona. So Arizona, Georgetown, Tulsa University, then Arkansas, and Temple University were the only schools.
Wow. And this was, when did you start getting into coaching? I mean, right out of college, but.
I became an assistant basketball coach in college in 1973.
Okay. 314 wins, at least documented on the internet. Is that somewhere close?
Yes.
That's close. Very good. That's a lot of wins.
It is.
I didn't find out how many losses. I didn't see that on there, but
you never want to look at losses. We just know we were blessed to have more wins than we had losses.
Which sticks with you longer as a coach, a win or a loss?
Unfortunately, the losses. The one that I'll probably never forget, because we lost by 1 on a last second free throw in the finals of the regionals that would have put us in the Elite Eight. We were a team that had won 21 consecutive games. We're a really, really good team. And the team that beat us was also a good team. I think we both had 4 losses. But they stick with you more.
Yeah. Wow. Now, there's something that I also saw that you were the president of the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Here's a few other people who were that. A guy by the name of Fogg Allen, Roy Williams, Dean Smith, Jim Boeheim, and our coach Clayton here. Now, you had an assistant by the name of Tom Izzo in that position. Is that correct?
Actually, Tom Izzo was the president the year before me.
Oh, okay.
So
I
was vice president.
I promoted him to your assistant.
Yeah, my assistant was Tubby Smith.
Okay, I've heard of him too.
Yeah, he became the president after I did. But that was a great experience because that means that you are now heading the organization that represents all of the college basketball coaches across all different divisions. So that was quite an experience for me and quite an honor for a guy like me from Florida to become the president of the National Association of Basketball Coaches.
Well, why I share that is everyone I've talked to around any type of college basketball, they know of you, they speak well of you, they love you. You have, John Maxwell would call it this personhood level of leadership of you've been leading at such a high level with respect so long, it's become synonymous with who you are. So I want to take it back a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about Nations of Coaches, which you are VP of right now, and how we've connected. But take it a little bit back. How did your faith with Christ become pivotal? Is it something you grew up with growing up in Florida? You mentioned that coach. How did your life become absolutely aligned with who Jesus is?
Because of my college coach. His name is Phil Worrell. He's 85, almost 86 years old. He's my best friend. He loved Jesus, and he became my college coach, and coaching to him was a ministry. He came out of high school, but he had attended Milligan College and played with guys like Sonny Smith, who coached at Auburn, and Charles Bark and those guys. And one of his best friends was a guy named Dale Harris, who was just inducted into the James Naismith Hall of Fame, 45 years in the NBA Coach of the Year. Coach Moses Malone, Jabbar, Shaq, Kobe. We all went to the same school, strong Christian. They coach with the end in mind. That's what we always call it. And the end in mind is coaching for the purpose of leading young men to Christ so that their life will have value and meaning, and that their life will mean something in the end. I learned that from my college coach. He was the first real example I had of someone who lived the Christian faith. Not just say it, talk it, but actually lived it. And that was his example, not only to me, but all of my teammates and all the guys that he coached. And so it was through my relationship with him, being his assistant for 4 years, not only experiencing how he did it as a coach from a player standpoint, but watching him do it as a coach and teaching me how to do it as a coach. And so instead of going to law school, I took the LSAT, and felt like God was leading me to do what my college coach did, which was coach, which I never wanted to do. Even though I had a brother who had been a coach, I didn't want to coach. I didn't want any parts of it. But when I saw what Phil did and the impact of what he did had on me, then I thought God was leading me to go in the direction of trying to impact other people the same way.
So using coaching as a means to a higher end, that your players would understand what a better end game is, which for many people, coaching is the end game. But for you, coaching wasn't the end game at all. How did your faith with Christ impact all levels of your coaching?
Well, what I understood was the whole purpose for living, which is to glorify God. So coaching was a way for me to do that. I would glorify him through my coaching. And in the process of doing that, I glorify him by demonstrating to others that he is who he says he is. He's the savior of the world, and that life only has meaning because of him. And I would demonstrate that with my players, and I would encourage them that way. And so I would love them that way so that they would understand or have some idea of what does the love of God look like. And so I wanted them to see that in me. I wanted them to know that a lot of guys came from a one-parent home. They had no idea what a dad looked like. You know, they didn't know what a father did because they didn't have one. They didn't know what a husband was supposed to do because they didn't get to see their dad in that role. I got to do that for them. But I got to let them know that the reason I do it the way I do it is because that's the way Christ says it's supposed to be done. That's how you're supposed to love your wife. And then I tried to love them that way as well, as if they were my own children. So God just used that. And as a result of it, I've got a lot of children out there. I've got former players that have told me, you know, Coach, you changed my life. I was a knucklehead, and then here's what you did. And sometimes that meant tough love and holding guys accountable. And so I knew that's what God wanted me to do. There was no question. And so I took off in that direction, and he blessed every step that I took.
Wow. So how did following Christ impact your competitive nature?
It did make me less competitive. But I learned how to channel my competitiveness. Okay. I say this, and it's going to sound egotistical. That's not the intent. But in 40 years of coaching, there's not one player that will ever tell you he heard me use bad language. I never heard it from my coach. In the 8 years that I was around him, it's not the way we're supposed to function. And by the grace of God, I was able to coach that way. I had a player send me an email once because he told his son's, what would you call, city coach that was coaching the team, was using bad language, and he asked him why. And the coach said, well, you got to do that. That's how you got to motivate players. You just sometimes have to do that. And he said, I had a coach for 4 years that never did that one time. And that blessed me. But I learned that from our college coach. But not only did I learn that from him, I learned that wasn't Christ's way.
Yeah. Wow.
And I had to do Christ's way. I had to honor him in how I coached. And that meant also in how I spoke to the players.
Well, you consider them family, as you mentioned. I read that over 90% of your players ended up getting degrees from the school that you coached them at, which is a fabulous accomplishment, using basketball as a tool for something greater and setting them up for life, not only in their interaction with you, but even their academic pursuit. Well, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now with Nations of Coaches, an organization I hadn't heard of till about 5 years ago that now I've become a part of. Tell us a little bit about what it is and what your role is there and why it's so important to you.
Well, my role has changed. At first, I was director of the coaches ministry, and that is working with certain events. Like we would have legacy summits that we would have where we would train coaches how to coach and how to coach from a biblical perspective. Then also I would go out and we would place what we call character coaches on campuses to work with coaches, to help coaches in their character training of themselves and also their athletes. And that's how I met you. Because we were looking for a character coach for Missouri State. So I would go out and find guys like you. We would train them and then I would work with them and encourage them. But now I'm actually vice president of Nation of Coaches. So now I'm more of a national spokesman for Nation of Coaches. But what I do most of all is I'm a pastor for coaches. That's my heartbeat. If you ask me, what do I love doing? I love working with coaches, sharing the gospel with coaches, counseling coaches, mentoring coaches, and trying to get them to look at it this way. You're just like Christ. Christ went out and he recruited a team, recruited 12 players. He called them disciples. And what he did was he spent his time pouring into their lives and training and preparing them to enter into the game. The game that they were going to enter was not a basketball game, but it was a game of life where they would have to play and be able to win men to Christ as they went out and made disciples. But they didn't know how to do that. So he had to show them how to do that. And he started with the foundation, you see. And that foundation was their relationship with himself, the great master, the teacher, the Christ. And they watched him do it. He demonstrated love to them and showing them the importance of love. And that's what coaches have to do. You got to love your players. They got to know you love them. They got to know you care about them. And so that's what I do now is I'm teaching coaches how to love their players, the role that love plays. Because what we know from Scripture is that it says, greater love has no man than this, that he laid down his life for a friend. We saw Christ lay down his life, give of himself that we might have. So what you want now is for your coaches to give of themselves, that they might pour life into their players, and that their players will leave and pour life into others. And so then the process just continues, and you just have that impact. The hardest thing about what I do now is I do the actual work of a pastor in terms of counseling coaches. It may be family issues. It may be staff issues. It's middle of what you're doing. Do you function the way that Christ would function? See, especially this thing about the families. That's the hard part. Because as you know, coaching is very demanding and families can go by the wayside. And so one of the main things we do in our ministry, our marriage ministry that we call home court, is to try to help establish strong marriages for coaches, because you can't win at coaching players and impacting players if you can't impact your own family.
Yeah. What are some of the unique pressures that coaches face to be able to, that you're able to help coach them through?
The hardest pressure is winning. We call it the three W's: the win, the wait, and the war. The win becomes the idol. That becomes what they serve. They serve winning. And so in order to win, they get this weight, this tremendous pressure to get it done. And if you're around coaches, you see that. I got to win. I got to win. I may get fired. This may happen. That may happen. So that pressure of winning, that idol that they see in everybody surrounding them, the alumni, the fans, the media, everybody's about winning. And so that weight becomes so great that it creates the war. The war is, how do I go about winning? How do I accomplish it? Do I do it the right way? Do I do it God's way? Do I do it man's way? So I'm trying to move them along the line. You can accomplish the win, that pressure. You can handle the weight, and you can handle it because Christ can lift you up above any weight that someone can put on you. And you can do it his way and trust him, and you can relieve that pressure and accomplish that win.
Yeah. What are some things that you've learned that transcend even coaching? Just things about family, things about leading in your community. As a follower of Jesus, what are some things that have been important to you as a coach that you think any of our listeners should consider important as foundational ingredients for them to have impact for Christ, no matter what setting they're in?
To be who you say you are. Because people seem to be more interested in what you do than what you say. And so if what I do does not bear witness to what I say, they're not going to listen.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I know that is because I was that way until I met my college coach. Don't tell me about Christ and what he can do in your life, and yet you live like everyone else. It doesn't work. I can't tell my players that I love them and they're important to me and then treat them like dirt. I can't say to them that marriage is important and I'm not faithful and loving to my wife and kids, because they watch you. They're always interested in what you do, much more than what you say. And here's an example. I remember teaching a class and I was talking about marriage. And when it was over, my wife said, that one of the ladies in the class told her, when he was speaking, I was watching you.
Wow.
Because if I watched you, your expressions and reactions to what he said would let me know if that's what he was really doing. So that's the pressure. The pressure is for coaches to be who they say they are in Christ, to honor their marriages and their families, to let the players see that. Because you're a pastor. It's one thing for you to get up and preach on Sunday. It's another thing for you to live what you preach. And what I'm finding out is people are far more interested in you do than they are in what you say.
Yeah. That's really good. I just want to, share when I met you is, several years ago, I had met Coach Ford at Missouri State, and we had talked. I had no idea what Nations of Coaches was, that there were character coaches or whatnot. And I remember getting a call from you one day saying that you were looking to talk to me about potentially being a character coach. And I remember we met. We sat down at a hotel lobby and we began talking. And we talked about the role. But really, I was just drawn into how committed you were to helping have a Jesus-centric encouragement in the ears of the coaches and the players. And I was just fascinated that there is a movement going on with schools all over the nation. How many character or schools do you have character coaches at? Are there hundreds?
Yeah, I think our number now is about 170.
117 schools.
170.
Oh, wow.
70. And that is Division I, Division II, Division III. From large schools like the University of Tennessee down to small schools. We've had character coaches at Auburn, Alabama, Texas A&M. I mean, just different schools. And we're in the process now of preparing to place some at some other institutions. What happens, once the season starts, you get out of the placement mode because they're focusing on winning on the season. But as soon as the season's over, then we go back into preparing to place the character coaches. And we have character coaches that work with just coaches, and we have some character coaches on the staff that work just with players.
Yeah. Well, I'm just appreciative of the opportunity. So one, I love the opportunity to work with Coach Ford and his staff. as a character coach. And Will Maxwell actually works with all the Missouri State basketball players as their character coach. And our North Pointers know Will is our Republic campus pastor. But one of my great joys in that whole process has been our scheduled conversations, that now we have a regular opportunity to talk. And every time I talk to you, whether it's on the phone or in person, you have a way to encourage, you have a way to align, you have a way to remind me of my purpose, not only in my role as a character coach, but what I'm so thankful, you've become that quick mentor in my life, someone who's just got scripture that seems to be timely and seems to be helpful. And so I'm one of thousands of people across this nation who would put you as a mentor, Coach. And that's why I was excited for this conversation to share with our North Pointers is my takeaway would be this, is North Pointers, let's get a mentor. And what I found is mentors rarely just come and hand select you. Sometimes you've got to figure out how to get into their world. You got to read a book. You've got to make a phone call. You've got to ask them out for coffee. But find somebody who can be pouring into you. And secondly, let's grow in such a way where we can reflect Christ in such a way to others where they can be encouraged, challenged, stretched, and grow. And that's a big part of what community is all about. What I found with you, Coach, is community doesn't always have to be across the street. In our case, it's around the nation. But to be intentional about having someone you can talk to, intentional about having someone that can stretch you, can see something different, add the courage you need in the situation, and also give you the truth. I find that when you need the truth the most is when you want it the least. But when you have a good mentor in your life, they can give it to you. So, Coach, thank you for being a mentor, not only for people around the nation for many decades, for me. I know my wife always appreciates it when I'm talking to you. She knows I'm going to be a better version of me when I'm done talking with you. and I hope that's true in all aspects of life. But
well, let me say this. My college coach, I'm in 1969, has been a mentor for me ever since then, even today. But not only that, God's given me another mentor, Pastor Jerry Warren. He was a pastor for 40 years. He has 2 PhDs. He prays for me every day. I get scripture from him every day. And when I have questions, I go to Pastor Warren. So I thank you for encouraging me in terms of being a mentor. But I think it's important to say to you that I'm in total agreement because I have a mentor. And just 2 days ago, we went out to Chick-fil-A just for about an hour sit down, and God has used him to richly bless my life. Yeah. And so I appreciate the mentorship work that you're doing. I appreciate you working with Coach there at Missouri State. He loves you and feels like that you're just a very important part of his life. So I thank you for the work that you've done as well. Coach, you've always been an encouragement to me because you're a busy man. And to be a pastor and doing all that you're doing and taking time to pour into someone else's life. And I want to say this about you. I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm going to. I think I told you what impressed me so much that morning when we sat down. And I remember saying this to Coach. I said, I got to tell you something that Jeremy said to me that resonated and just touched my heart, is he has a passion for the city. And understanding the influence that the coach at Missouri State could have, and if that coach can be impacted and that coach can be used by God to impact the city as a person of influence, then you are all about trying to impact him so that your city could be impacted. And I just thought that was a great testimony. And when you said that to me, I thought, man, this is the guy. I'll never forget that. Wow. Your passion for the whole city Go Springfield.
Well, Springfield is now Dreamfield. We're excited about what God's doing here. And we're also big fans of Missouri State. Go Bears. This will probably be dropping right as conference season is getting heated up, ready for March and Arch Madness, hopefully both this year. So, hey, thanks so much for your time, Coach. Always a blessing. And so we're going to drop in our show notes here. If you're joining us through YouTube, Nations of Coaches, we'll put their website there. If you're interested in what they're doing, maybe you want to jump in and help support what they're doing. They're doing great work with schools all over the nation as a ministry. But Coach, thanks for doing what you're doing. And those who are listening to us, have a great week. Let's live the kind of lives that make it easy for people to believe what we're saying. So, all right, have a great week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.